One of your posts, which was about a compensation feature, went hyper viral. How do you figure out what the narrative around a data set is going to look like?
Is equity management, although we do a lot more than equity management these days as well. It gives me a privileged data set that is aggregated and anonymized about what startups are doing effectively, how they're raising, how they're growing, the choices their founders are making.
How do you create your graphs and charts in 10 minutes?
At the beginning, it took me an hour and a half sometimes. Like, it took a while to create a good looking chart. Now it takes 10 minutes. And the reason it takes that short is because...
Welcome everyone to the Grown On podcast. This is episode 3. My name is Caitlin Bigelow. I'm the CMO at Blazel. Today I have Peter Walker, the head of insights at Carta. Peter's content constantly shows up in our Slack channel, but here's the thing. There are a lot of marketers out there, myself included, asking the same question. How do we do what Peter Walker is doing at Carta with our own proprietary data? So today we're gonna make answering that question a whole lot easier. Peter is gonna break down his exact playbook, but first, let me show you why this matters. While every other B2B SaaS company was pouring millions into paid ads and demand gen, Peter built a content engine at Carta, and he started sharing insights on LinkedIn, X, and YouTube. The Herculean effort in front of him was this: how do you make cap table management interesting? Carta was sitting on a mountain of proprietary data, and if he could take that data about startups and tell interesting stories, he could build audience, trust, and pipeline. So fast forward to today. His LinkedIn posts regularly spark 300 to 1,000 plus likes. Founders quote his data in board meetings, and VCs cite his research in partner memos. Last year, he generated an astounding 28 million impressions on LinkedIn alone. So let's talk about what 28 million impressions actually means in dollars and cents. So on LinkedIn, 1,000 impressions costs around $30 if you were gonna pay for it in paid ads. So if I take 28 million, I divide that by 1,000, that's 28,000 units, and multiply that by $30. That's $840,000. So that's more than $750,000 in paid media equivalent that he generated organically on one channel alone. But here's where it gets really interesting. Marketing folks know that organic impressions are not the same as paid ads. So organic content has 3 to 5 times higher engagement and trust, which means the effective value of what he did on LinkedIn last year alone could be somewhere between $2 to $4 million annually. But the gulf widens even further. High intent inbound flows directly into the pipeline for Carta, and earned media amplifies the message further. In fact, in a single week in January, Carta was featured in 16 different publications and another 7 newsletters, all because they have interesting data and stories that they can leverage. Once Peter hits post, distribution is free. So how did Peter actually build this engine? We're unpacking his playbook today, because the reality is there are thousands of startups sitting on this interesting mountain of data, and they don't know how to leverage it. So today he's gonna show us how he decides what's worth sharing, how he turns spreadsheets into stories that people will actually care about, and what most executives get completely wrong when they think about personal brand on LinkedIn.
Peter Walker, you are a legend in the startup community. Welcome to Grown On.
That is too kind. Legend is a little strong, but I appreciate it. Great to be here.
Do you go to events where people are like, oh, I feel like I know you because I've been following your LinkedIn for years or something like that?
I would say there's a few parasocial relationships, I would imagine. Yeah, I did a lot of events last year, a lot of in-person speaking, a lot of stuff like that. And there was always wonderful to meet people who've been reading the stuff on LinkedIn and have a lot of thoughts on it, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. So you have over 160,000 followers, but who's counting? You post roughly five days a week, and I have notifications turned on for you. So I see you posting on the weekends sometimes.
True.
So what's the coolest thing that's happened to you because of LinkedIn posting?
I like how you want only the good stories as opposed to me getting ridiculed in my college group chat for posting too much on LinkedIn.
We are going to get into that too. Don't you worry.
Okay.
We want to get into the ridicule and the pain of all of this as well.
I was going to say, this isn't, I don't want to paint too rosy a picture of it. What's the coolest thing? I mean, the unexpected part about being more public in an industry that I really care about, which in this case is startups and venture capital, is like there's so many amazing conversations that only happen in DMs or dinners that you get an invite to, or someone, some big name VC is swinging through San Francisco and wants to grab coffee and talk about the latest thing that they disagreed with when you posted it on LinkedIn. Like that stuff is not, there's no predictability to it. It just sort of happens, but it's really where the great stuff is, where you can like start making intros, and then you get to give back in the same way, where you get to start making intros of two people that you find really interesting to each other and all that kind of stuff. So kind of all these network effects just build on each other, and you can't predict it. And it just, when it happens, it's glorious. It's really cool.
I think a lot of people suffer from this like cold start problem on LinkedIn, or there's this kind of like embarrassment or shame of like posting and feeling like your content doesn't do well.
Yeah.
Like, it's, you obviously have spent a lot of time kind of figuring out what works. But like, maybe you could take us back to when you were first starting and like walk us through some of the pain when it wasn't so like, I hit post and I get 1,000 likes. Like, what does that look like? Because I think that's the problem that a lot of people are kind of struggling with too.
I think, so one, people should know that it doesn't go away. Like there's content, maybe it changes a little bit in terms of scale, but there's still a decent amount of time where I post something that I think is really good and it just crickets, relatively. And I'm like, well, that was annoying. I spent time building that and I thought it was good, or else I wouldn't have posted it. So that's like, if that's the problem and you're unsure if you can take that, then this might not be the right path because that's going to happen regardless. The other part is when you get back to the ridicule, group chat ridicule that I was suffering at the beginning. When I started doing this at Carta, it was late 2021, early 2022. And there was a solid, call it 4 or 5 months where it felt like I was posting 3-4 times a week and nobody cared. View it as a gift. And that's super easy to say as someone who now has a relatively large following. But the gift is, okay, one, if nobody read it, that means you can do it again with a different headline or whatever, and it's fine. Nobody read it the first time. So you're not like imposing on them or being too repetitive, quote unquote. And the second thing is you are now experimenting with your content. So if there's one thing that I think people don't focus on, it's everyone tracks the stuff that is easy, impressions, likes, DMs, the stuff where it's like, oh, the response to my content. What they don't track, but they should, is the cycle time of my content. How long does it take me to build one good thing? For me, it's usually charts and graphs. So at the beginning, it took me an hour and a half sometimes. Like it took a while to create a good looking chart. Now it takes 10 minutes. And the reason it takes that short is because I've gotten a lot of reps and now we've built systems to create better content. You're not going to do that unless you commit to doing it up front. So the nice part about getting 0 likes on something is, well, did you do it faster than yesterday at least? Awesome. Then you still did a good thing. You still helped your system overall. And you can kind of remove a little bit of that emotion of like, nobody cares about what I'm saying.
And this is like a question we get a lot too, is like, how long should it take for you to feel like you're getting signal or feel like you're moving momentum in the right direction with what you're doing?
In terms of an actual inflection in what, let's be honest, what most people think about, which is follower count. If you haven't felt anything in the first 2 months, then you should change directions. But the flip side is if you haven't seen any uptick in a week, you don't have enough of a sample size to know whether or not it's working or not. Maybe you just missed that week. Maybe, Elon, SpaceX IPO'd that week and it drowned out all the other news. Like nobody wanted to read anything that wasn't about Elon. That stuff happens. The world is messy and big and you can't time everything perfectly, which makes it really, I think, important, and probably we'll get there, that you don't try and wake up every morning and say, what am I going to post today? Or like, what am I going to make content, or what do I want to say? It's really difficult to have a creative brainwave 365 times a year. It's just like, it's almost impossible to do. So you need to set yourself up with systems where you kind of know the kind of content you want to create and for what reasons. And then you can just execute on that content and iterate on the headlines and, spend time where time matters. because it's almost never your whole job to do this.
Right. Getting traction or meaningful engagement with posts is kind of like picking a lane to like your lane. Like your lane is clearly data related to startups. Like people want to know what comp packages look like. People want to know benchmarks against fundraising. People, like you've kind of got your pillars that you speak to. So I think kind of defining that is important for people. Other thing that you could look at too is like how your audience is built.
Yeah. If you pick a lane and then you end up having to switch lanes dramatically, there's lanes that are clustered together and then there's lanes that are 180. Like if I started a cooking channel, or a bunch of cooking content, like how would that do? Not great, probably. Because the algo is more and more an interest graph than it is necessarily a strict follower one. So, some people complain about that as like unfair or something. It's like, no, this is just, you're not guaranteed reach.
No.
Content is content. Find your best, like people who made a lot of money and grew big accounts 10 years ago don't have any right to those accounts even now. Like I think it's kind of silly. Your content just needs to get better or more interesting. But to the lane part, I always feel like sometimes the advice about stick to a lane or like at least niche down at the beginning, I think it's useful, but it can definitely be overdone. Like I talk to startup founders, but I also talk to their CFOs, their heads of people, their investors, the LPs, the angels. Like I talk to a bunch of people and, I have this great data set that we get to play around with. But if I was only talking to founders every single day, exactly that person, I think I would repeat myself a little too much, and not just repeating, but I would have fewer things to say. So I don't think it's bad to branch out a little bit from your target ICP to the people around them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think the other thing I see a lot is that some founders like, okay, I've got to show up on LinkedIn now. I need to start posting, and their content just, it becomes, they feel like it's thought leadership, but it's really just like a product advertisement wrapped in the veneer of thought leadership. And it's like, there's a reason why you have to pay for ads. No one just wants to hear you talk about your company and your product all the time, right? Like
100%.
Think about who is your ideal customer and what are the meaty, juicy problems that they're trying to solve? And how do you show that you understand the space, right? Like, how do you show that you can build trust and confidence and authority around certain topic themes? How do you figure out what people will be interested in? How do you figure out what the narrative around a data set is going to look like? Because it's not like that's how it's packaged. It's in spreadsheets and buried in dashboards and things. So how do you even go about doing that? And like what advice do you have for companies that maybe are sitting on, a lot of proprietary data that they could be disseminating out as great content?
There's like a whole ton of tails to that. I think first off, though it may be, you're right, like is equity management, although we do a lot more than equity management these days as well, the sexiest category. It's not, we're not building rockets. But what it does is it gives me a privileged data set that is aggregated and anonymized about what startups are doing effectively, how they're raising, how they're growing, the choices their founders are making. And startups and VC is a really vibrant community of people who only want to talk about startups and VC. Like it is, it is insular in some ways, but they are incredibly loud. They always want to talk about the latest thing. The VCs, if venture capital, I think it's probably on balance a good thing for the economy, et cetera. But what it's great at is talking about itself. And so everybody wants a new data point to talk about. What we realized when I came into Carta to start this insights function is that if you're sitting on a data set like this, where by dint of product usage, you can tell stories about the industry, it really, really matters that you know how to storytell to those people and that you're not, as you mentioned, trying to make everything a veiled product demo or a veiled pitch for your company. So at the very beginning, I think this was important that we set philosophically, I'm not trying to sell you. I don't have a lead target. I don't care really at the beginning if you become a Carta customer. What I want is to build affinity for Carta in the ecosystem. And I do that by telling you about the world that you live in. And the world you live in is full of investors who want to take advantage of you potentially. It's full of other founders who are moving faster than you. It's full of difficulty fundraising, and there's full of AI wave fears, and it's full of all these uncertainties. And Carta data can be this little island in this storm where you go to and you're like, okay, here I get some actual actionable stuff. I can take it to my co-founder and say, we're trying to hire an engineer. Here's the range we should be thinking about. And I know it's real because there's 60,000 startups on the platform. More than half of US venture capital uses Carta. So like, that's a privilege for me that I get to work at that aggregate level. But there are a lot of startups that could start with something smaller than that and make really great content. I think the insights persona has become more of a thing over the past 5 years. Ramp has a chief economist now who's amazing. His name's Ara. Everyone should follow him. CB Insights, Jason Saltzman's a friend. There's like 4 or 5 people who are now doing this job across startups. And I think it's just going to get more and more common.
When Carta posted this insights role and hired you for this role, how built out was the vision of kind of what you guys wanted to achieve? It's not like you walked in day one, or maybe you did walk in day one and say like, this is the grand vision. This is where I think we can get. Like, what does that journey look like?
So there wasn't a posting. I pitched this role to them at the beginning, and I was coming off of an experience where, so my background's in data analytics and marketing. I was a founder in college and jumped around a bunch of different small startups. So I loved startups, loved data, loved charts and graphs. And then 2020 happened. I was working at this company, but COVID, I ended up starting charting a bunch of COVID data online. And then the Atlantic magazine got in touch and said, hey, do you want to come and be a part of this project we're spinning up around COVID tracking? So I did that for a year as well. And that was the MBA, a PhD of this experience, where it's a data set that's obscure, always changing, really slightly controversial sometimes. Yeah, you think my DMs are bad for startup data? You should have seen my DMs in 2020. It was not that fun. And the key is like, there's almost an insatiable appetite for more charts, more explanations, more understanding. And so we built systems to build visuals every single day where we kept up with the story of what was going on in COVID. And then after that, I made a list of companies, and Carta was number one on that list that had a data asset worth doing this with. So I wouldn't say we came in with a fully baked plan, but I at least knew that I could replicate some of the things I had been doing for the Atlantic here and at a different scale. The big difference between those two experiences is at the Atlantic and at other places, it was from company accounts. It was from organizational accounts. Here, the one of, if not the biggest channel for our insights is my personal social. That was not on purpose. We played around with totally different models at the beginning, and then it just happened to be the case that the personal social was by far the best way to disseminate this stuff. And so then it became tied up with my personal brand. And that's kind of weird, if we're being honest. Like it is weird.
Like, what happens if you decide to leave Carta?
I don't know. I think that some of this is inherent in the world that we live in, which is it's really easy to make bad content and everyone's attention spans are flooded and the algos favor people. In a world where those 3 things are true, I think it's almost inevitable that there will be more quote unquote in-house talent at companies that are not the founder. Everyone assumes like the founder, perfect, because they're never leaving, right? Although they do leave sometimes. So like the founder brand and the company brand being the same in this way, like the insights motion works amazing if the founder wants to be the voice of it. But I think it's also a wonderful opportunity for someone who's not the founder to then go be an evangelist for the company at all these different places, in person and digital, without, it does introduce that little bit of weirdness, but the goal is to like raise the awareness of this company in the ecosystem. And if you've done that, like that's the job.
I think that what you're describing though is actually a fundamental shift in how marketing departments will work. And like, this is actually something I'm betting my career on, that this will be the case, is that historically, it's always been about marketing supporting the corporate brand. It's the logo, it's the Carta logo, it's McDonald's, it's Tesla, it's whatever, it's OpenAI. But more and more, we're seeing this shift where it's not just this kind of faceless corporate logo anymore. It's all of the individuals that make up the company, right? It's Sam Altman, it's Elon Musk, it's Donald Trump. It's like these people who have gotten really good at social. Part of the thing that's driving this shift as well is I think AI is contributing to this in a lot of ways where it's never been easier to kind of create crappy content. And we're flooded with just all this crappy content. People want to build relationships and trust with individuals kind of over these big corporate brands, and people who have something that feels original or vulnerable or, drives real value or insight for them.
No, it definitely does. 100%. The question really back is not, will this be the future of marketing? I think it kind of already is. And like different industries will adopt it at different paces. And it's not, just like we still use laptop computers, but social dominates, like other forms of marketing will still be there and valuable and important to do. This is just like sort of the arena where things happen most, I would say, these days. And like trust built into people through parasocial relationships, to be honest. That is like the future of where a lot of this, and B2B has been adopting it slower than B2C, but B2B is getting there really right now. The big thing for me is, like I mentioned, it's not that I need to, it's not that I don't think it has impact on pipeline. I definitely it's, at the end of the day, this is the reason why we're doing this. It's that I think the people who are going to do it best won't be gold on pipeline.
Yeah.
The people who do it best will be independent from the need to sell themselves. And so they'll be able to act in the customer interest in a way that, in a weird roundabout way, makes them better sellers.
That makes total sense to me.
I'm answering the DM from the founder who wants a data point on Sunday morning because I'm going to do it. I don't need him to be like, hey, book a demo here, and then I'd love to give you this piece of information. No, that's not my role. My role is like, I want to help you as a founder. I want to help you as a VC. I want to help you increasingly as a private equity investor now, because Carta's in private equity. So it's not that orientation, and it's super easy for the marketer to say that's what I want. But are you going to get the buy-in from the CEO and other people to be like, yes, that's what we want too? That's the real hard part.
Yeah. That's it. I love that angle. Like, I would love for you to walk us through from kind of like the inception of an idea to how it gets created, how it gets distributed across social. Because you're not just on LinkedIn, you're on X, you've got your own podcast that you run. So maybe you could break down your playbook for us.
So insights content at a macro level, I'd say it always for us starts with the data. Content strategies can have a lot of different forms, but when this is as focused in the numbers as we are, for us, we think about our work at Carta in atomic units. The atomic unit of insights is one chart, a single chart. And so basically what that means is anytime we create anything, we're effectively creating something that we think can be published. So like all of our work is to create things that could be published now. Maybe not. Maybe we'll aggregate them together in a big report. Maybe we'll put them in a deck together and share them with business development. Maybe this chart will become a bullet point in our CEO's next keynote, whatever it is. But we build it as though it's going to get shared in public. So all of our work basically boils down to that. And there's a step before that, which is exploring the data, understanding the narratives. I got to be honest, I could tell you a lot about like the heuristics that we use. What it boils down to is, are you curious about your own industry or not? Like I can teach you how to build a cool chart. I can teach you probably how to be a better writer, although that's a little bit more difficult. AI maybe helps somewhat there, or hurts, depending on who you ask. I can't teach you to be curious about startups. Like, I have a team of 2. It's the 3 of us now. If the 3 of us didn't love startups and like we're actively reading all the news anyways, we would be bad at our jobs. You have to have that innate motivation to just like voraciously consume information. You have to just be fascinated by what you're doing. And then everything that you build is easier because like if you like it, then other people who are obsessive about this thing will also like it. You're building for yourself first. So say we put out content basically every day, as you mentioned, every weekday. We have a new charter graph. Some of that is well known in advance, like, hey, we're releasing a state of private markets report on this date, meaning in the week up to it, we're going to release little teaser charts or whatever it is. Some of that is dictated by the product roadmap. Carta's got a big product launch on March 31st. So for the week up to it, do we have content that is associated with that product launch or is talking to that same ICP, et cetera? And some of that is what's going on in the news. Oh, there was a big fight between two VCs on Twitter. Do we have data that confirms or denies like one part of that fight, whatever it is? That last part is the part that everyone kind of thinks is the sexiest. It's also by far the hardest to do because you have to do it immediately. Like there's such a time component to it. We only do that. We used to try to do that more and we only do that right now when we really think, oh, there's an opportunity to leverage it. I think as an example, our friend at Ramp, their chief economist, when the 996 stuff was going on and everyone was wondering if anyone in San Francisco slept, he put out like data the next day on like showing statistically that yes, 996 basically only exists in the 7 miles of San Francisco, and it went viral and it was great. When you can capture something like that, it's awesome, but those don't come around.
Yeah, that's the lightning in a bottle moments. There's this insatiable curiosity to the industry. You're thinking about it with the idea of I need to produce a chart or a data piece that can be published. Once you have that thing, once you have the item published, then how is it getting disseminated across different social?
So I think about it as primary channels and secondary channels. My primary channel is LinkedIn. Not everyone's, but mine. So most of the stuff that I build will start there. The quick secondaries are X and then the podcast. We also are on YouTube. That's a little hit or miss for us. We got to do better at video. That's on us to do more of this year. TikTok, Instagram, we haven't really cracked super well. We do see a lot of VCs who reshare our charts on Instagram and TikTok and get some pretty good traction. So that it's always like, oh, should we be doing more there? But it's never the first priority for us. So the number one channel is LinkedIn. What happens there is, so a very common pattern. We put out something on LinkedIn. It gets a good amount of attention. There's a lot of cool comments in it. We make a mental note or a note in our system and we say, that was a great topic, seemed to spark another thing. If we get a couple more charts around that topic that go really well, then the team huddles up and goes, maybe we should build a longer report on this. Most people do it the opposite way, where they build a longer report and then take stuff from that report and create atomized content. I think it's so silly to assume you know something is going to work. Build the atoms first, and then when it's working, build the long report.
That's such a great insight.
I cannot tell you the number of marketing teams who spend a long time building a 30-page PDF that gets read twice. And one of the downloads was their own CMO. It's like, come on. So your audience will tell you whether or not that was useful.
You're almost using LinkedIn as signal because it's so easy to just put out, a post. You could put 5 posts out a week. That's 5 signals on what your audience cares about. And if you do that every week and you compound, you're building this data set on what topics your audience finds most interesting.
You've de-risked it. You've said, hey, we've put out 5 charts over the last 2 weeks on seed valuations. Every one of them has been eaten up. We should do a state of seed report. And so we do. And then those become lead magnets. Those, we mid-gate most of our content for the longer reports where we give a lot of it up for free and then like emails, et cetera. Sometimes what we'll do is we'll make the whole thing available to everyone. And then the emails is if you want like a deck version or the data behind this. So lots of different ways on how to, attract some like MQLs or emails there. The other thing that we do, and this is the part I wish I had started earlier, is every one of our graphics points back to a landing page on our website where all of our data lives. It's carta.com/data. And there you can subscribe to our newsletter. You can watch the podcast. You can subscribe to the podcast. You can read all of our old reports. You just have so much value there. We didn't have that specific page or that specific zone for landing for like the first year and a half at Carta. And I definitely missed a bunch of value that I should have just been pointing people back to. Because the whole goal for social is this is a rented audience. Yeah. You don't own your follower graph on LinkedIn really at all. So how can you get them to an email subscription? How can you get them to opt in to stuff, virtual events based on data, all sorts of different things?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a great tip. So how does like kind of PR earned media then play into the strategy as well? Because I saw a post of yours recently where in 1 week, you had earned, I think it was like 12 newspaper placements, 7 newsletters. And actually some of the stuff happening on like Substacks and Beehive these days that can be incredible places to show up because they're so niched down to certain audiences that I could see a world in which appearing on a few of those select publications would be more valuable than even a Wall Street Journal, feature or mention in an article or something. How does that tie into this strategy?
It's a great point, and you're right to note that this is not exclusive to earned media as like the end all be all. I care about Substack writers in startups almost more, sometimes than reporters. So the strategy is really simple. You have an engine that's creating data content. So that engine is going to continually surface numbers and narratives and good-looking charts and graphs that explain something. You have a set of reporters that cover your industry, 20, 30. If you're in startups, maybe it's as little as 5 if you're in other places. You obsessively read their stuff. Anytime you have data that could have helped that story, you DM them and you say, hey, I love this piece. We could have added this kind of data point for you. If you want to collaborate or use us as a source in the future, would love to share it. You're not asking for them to cover Carta. You're not asking for their time. You're saying, I want to be a source for you, for evidence for your pieces moving forward. Sometimes it won't work. Like 80% of the time it does work because they're like, not that they're going to write about you immediately, but they go, cool, I'll keep that in mind. And then when they are writing about a piece, they talk to you and ask for a specific data point. That's the first level. The second level is once you've done that a few times with these great reporters, you just become a thought partner for them. So like they come to you before they don't come to you for a quote about a thing. They come to you to think through the angle on a piece that they're writing. And that's really where you can start like educating them with the data that you have about the industry that you're writing on. And you start building, real relationships with these folks. And of course, we have an amazing PR agency who helps us get in touch with those folks. And I have like our comms team is world class. And the data sort of feeds all those other motions. So I think it's a really, really aligned flywheel.
Absolutely. That's awesome. I want to hear about how did you say college buddies are ribbing you for posting on LinkedIn?
If you have idiot college friends like I do, who I love, that first 3 or 4 months where you're clearly like leaning into the cringe and trying to get people to follow you on any social platform, but LinkedIn especially, because LinkedIn is like the least cool of all social platforms.
Damn it.
You should... Sorry, it's just a fact. You should expect to get, viciously mocked in the group chat. And that's okay. Because guess what? I got viciously mocked in 2022. And now they're asking me to introduce them to people that I'm connected to on LinkedIn. So, hey, if it works, it'll come back around.
You're a good friend, Peter.
Well, I never introduce them, to be clear. I just say no.
That's good. You got to hold something over them, and have leverage at all times.
There's nothing more motivating than a grudge.
Yeah, I think that's really underutilized in business, actually.
It's healthy.
It's healthy.
Very healthy.
Yeah, it's healthy. Wonderful. One of your posts, which was about a compensation feature that Carta rolled out, went hyper viral. You got over 14,000 likes on that one post, which was about a feature that Carta was rolling out. What was the value of that post? Like, what happened out of there?
It was the first time that anything really took off. Actually, it was more than a few years ago now. And it was like the thing that we had rolled out was we have this product called Carta Total Compensation. It helps people figure out what to pay in salary and equity, which is pretty hard to do if you are paying, a level 5 software engineer for a private company. That data is not really out there, but we have an amazing database and we can aggregate it for you. And the little feature that we rolled out was during the offer stage, recruiters can show 2 or 3 different packages instead of one. So one with a little more equity, a little less salary, and then the reverse. So like candidates can kind of pick where they are in their life. If you do need more cash now with less equity, that kind of stuff. And I think it it was like a perfect storm of catching like the beginnings of a pay transparency wave that was really big, and then like thinking about all these different ways. It was also during a time period where people were jumping from job to job really fast in startup world. There was a lot of, it was like the great resignation, if we remember all the way back then. So it like just caught the right wave. What did it mean for us in terms of like internal business metrics? It was very helpful to new conversations with founders about that product, about Carta Total Comp. It was a really good week in that side, but it literally came completely out of random. Like you cannot. This is one thing that's very clear from my work, at least, is you cannot plan virality. And the tweets or the posts that you would like, if you looked over all of your content from the past year and you were like, I want this one to go viral, that would be most helpful to me, almost certainly is not going to be the one that does that. And you just kind of got to accept it and be like, okay, no problem. I'll take what I can get.
Yeah. Yeah. If I could schedule virality into my calendar, that would be wonderful. But alas, I am a mere mortal. So my final question is around kind of attribution. How should people even think about attribution, or how do people think about ROI on these channels? Like, what would your advice or recommendation be?
Well, look, I think that it's, I'm sure that if you have a company social account and if you're investing all in company content, you care about judging ROI. That's not a problem. And I think that's healthy. And it's not as though we don't track metrics on this content. We track impressions, we track downloads, we track whatever. I just don't I don't have a big, blinking red quota number in front of me and saying, look, like, what'd you do this quarter? What'd you do this month? Which is, it's just a different kind of world in sales. The other part about attribution is, and I feel this very strongly, especially for smaller companies, there is almost an inherent trade-off between being able to track exactly what a piece of content did and the reach of said piece of content. So like on social, for instance, if you put a bunch of links in your social posts, you will have fewer people read them. So you will get maybe slightly more clicks on those links that go to a landing page that you can track because you have a UTM on it, but fewer people will see the content. So that is your ultimate goal. And almost always, not always because you're going to do the link strategy occasionally, but almost always, at least for me, it is more important to have your content out there. The best stuff that you're going to do for your own marketing is things that you will not be able to attribute. I know personally of many, many dozens of times where I have put something out, someone has screenshotted that and put it into a WhatsApp group, and then a founder 3 weeks later comes to Carta and joins Carta. And then we find out, oh yeah, they had seen this in a WhatsApp group before and we had no idea about it. And you can never know. But that's what I want, right? That's why we create this stuff. And so I'm okay with not knowing because I'm going to default my systems to, I just want this to get as wide as possible. And I don't need to track it as much. And that is speaking from an incredibly privileged position at a company with a great data set and really aligned executives and all this kind of stuff. But I do think it matters.
What is data that you wish you knew about LinkedIn?
I mean, maybe slightly spicy take is like people spend way too much time caring about the algorithm. Like, who cares really? I mean, I know why people do that because it feels like kind of silly to spend a lot of time and not try to optimize it. But it also is something that you have no control over and it's going to change. So like I promise you, if you want to feel better, go find some big accounts that have a lot of followers that just spend their time complaining about how few people read their stuff. It can happen to them too, right? Like it's not just a you thing. If I had to pick one thing that I want to know from LinkedIn, this is maybe a minor one. LinkedIn shows you when you gain new followers, but it never tells you when people stop following you. I want to know that because if there's pieces of content that really cause a ton of followers to drop, I kind of want to know that too. So I wish it told me the net outcome, not just the gain.
Interesting. What's so offensive to people that they're unfollowing you?
I don't know. Maybe they're just annoyed that I'm there all the time.
God, Peter again in
fair.
my feed.
Peter,
this is the third time this week.
With this interesting chart. Yeah, they're just getting mad.
Yeah.
It's okay. The world is big. I get it.
Is there anything that I should have asked, Peter, that you think would be good to cover?
The point that I'd make in closing is that it can seem like this sort of motion, insights-based content in this way is really only available to companies that have a fantastic data set like Carta's. And so it's like, yeah, this is cool, but it's for like 10 companies, right? I would challenge a lot of marketers to be a little bit more creative about that. You can take the principles of insights and apply it to stuff that maybe it isn't even your data. Maybe it's public data, or you're using a little bit of your proprietary data, but marrying it up with data sets that you can find online. There is such a value in being the curator of information. Like, most people are not going to go through the McKinsey report and read what's going to happen to your industry. They're just not. So if you can take that and make it easily digestible in that way, like, that's data as well, even if it's not your proprietary data. Like, this can work for a lot of companies up and down the stack.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so glad that we're ending with that. It's such a great point, because I've seen posts do really well just because they found some interesting angle from someone else's data, put it together, and they put an opinion on the top of it. This is where I think this is heading. This is the trend I'm seeing. This is the data set that supports it. And it almost doesn't really matter if you're right or wrong. If you have an interesting hypothesis and it's formed in an educated way, then people are like, oh, okay, I learned something insightful there. Peter, thank you again for the conversation today. This was incredible. And I will keep following along and liking and commenting on your LinkedIn posts. I know you need the algorithm bump, and that you're feeling,
I do.
If I'm not personally involved in those comments, it could be like an ego boost there. So I will keep rooting for you on the side.
I'm always looking, Caitlin. So don't disappoint me here. This was fun. Thanks for having me.